Welcome back to today's Explainer. We are diving straight into a massive, highly publicized clash between the French luxury giant Louis Vuitton and the Chinese beverage chain Molly Tea. If you're a focused learner looking to seriously sharpen your English comprehension skills, well, you've landed in exactly the right place. This fascinating business case study actually doubles as high-yield CELPIP test prep. We're going to look at real-world events, analyze the specific language used to describe them, and pull out the exact structures that test makers absolutely love to use. Now, I want you to treat this as way more than just a news story. What we've got here is basically the perfect blueprint for mastering English comprehension. By breaking down the reporting on this event, we can extract the vocabulary, the different viewpoints, and the logic structures that are absolutely foundational for North American language exams.
Here is our agenda for today. 1. The LV versus Molly case. 2. Analyzing core viewpoints. 3. Essential high-frequency vocabulary. 4. Predicting CELPIP questions. And 5. Revealing language logic traps.
Let's jump right into Section 1, the LV versus Molly case.
Before we can really analyze the language, we need to understand the facts on the ground. And this number brilliantly illustrates the immediate legal reality of this whole story. 1.5 million books. The legal battle ended with Louis Vuitton winning a trademark infringement case against Molly Tea and Suzo. The court ordered Molly Tea to issue a formal apology and pay this massive fine of approximately 1.5 million US dollars. On paper, this looks like an open and shut case, right? Just a global giant crushing a much smaller competitor.
But here is the ironic plot twist. Losing the lawsuit, but winning the public. Despite the heavy legal and financial loss, Molly Tea actually managed to turn this crisis into a massive public relations victory. The court's ruling sparked this huge cultural debate on social media. The idea spread like wildfire. People started taking sides, and in doing so, they gave Molly Tea immense public sympathy and literally millions of dollars in free publicity.
Moving on to Section 2, analyzing core viewpoints.
When a story goes viral, knowing exactly who believes what is an absolutely critical reading comprehension skill. It's kind of like a giant puzzle. We've broken this specific case down into 3 distinct viewpoints for you. First up is the court's ruling, and their stance is strictly based on commercial law. The judge was entirely focused on visual similarities and the risk of consumer confusion. Then we have the public backlash. Their stance is rooted in cultural heritage. They argued that LV was basically trying to monopolize a shared historical design that you'd commonly see in ancient architecture, like the Tang Dynasty or Suzhou Gardens. And third, we have the PR outcome. Molly Tea took a stance of strategic goodwill. They essentially leveraged the negative news and paired it with a charitable donation to win over followers. Whenever you read a complex article, try to mentally build a framework just like this one.
Section 3. Essential high-frequency vocabulary. Real-world events like this are absolute goldmines for building up your language toolbox. The first essential term is trademark infringement case. Now notice how we've paired the English legal term with its Chinese translation to really lock in that definition for you, which is a lifesaver for tests like Reading Part 4. In the context of our story, this refers directly to LV suing Molly Tea for using a design that LV felt was their legally protected property.
Next up, we have licensed collaboration. This is what happens when 2 brands officially partner up. Like a high-end luxury fashion house teaming up with a popular local cafe. The absolutely crucial point here is that the court's biggest fear was consumer confusion. They were worried that everyday buyers would look at a Molly teacup and mistakenly think, oh, this must be a legitimate, official, licensed collaboration with Louis Vuitton.
All right, moving over to the artistic side of things, we have motif and chinoiserie. A motif is simply a recurring decorative design or pattern. In this dispute, the public was fiercely arguing that the controversial 4-petal design was actually a shared cultural motif. They felt it was heavily influenced by traditional Chinese aesthetics or chinoiserie rather than being some modern invention entirely owned by a European luxury brand.
And finally, we have an incredibly useful idiom for you: touch a nerve. When something touches a nerve, it provokes a very strong, highly sensitive reaction. This phrase is absolutely crucial for identifying public sentiment when you're tackling a reading or listening passage. LV's legal action didn't just cause a minor disagreement, right? It deeply touched a nerve regarding shared cultural heritage. And that is exactly why the online backlash was so intense.
Section 4, predicting CELPIP questions.
Okay, let's put you right in the test taker's seat. We're going to analyze exactly how examiners turn this type of juicy news item into tricky questions. So, imagine you're taking listening part 4, which deals with a news item. The very first question almost always targets the main idea or the speaker's overarching purpose. You might see a question like, what is the primary focus of this news report? Sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? Well, don't be fooled. The test makers are actively trying to distract you here.
The big trick here is that examiners will pit the literal event against the actual news angle. A really common distractor option would claim the focus is an in-depth financial analysis of Louis Vuitton's global expansion. But you know better than that. The correct option focuses on the broader societal and cultural debate that was sparked by the legal dispute. You always have to distinguish between the physical event, which is just the lawsuit, and the underlying reason the journalist is actually talking about it.
Here's another classic question type, perspective attribution. The question might ask, according to the report, what was a key reason for the court's ruling against Molly T? The real challenge here is making sure you don't accidentally mix up the judge's strict legal reasoning with all those passionate complaints from the internet users.
Let's break down the options. The distractor here claims the court ruled against Molly T because there was proof that the motif originated exclusively in Europe. No way. That's a completely false claim designed to sound a lot like the cultural debate happening online. The correct answer is grounded purely in commercial law. It's the likelihood that consumers would mistakenly believe the two brands had an official partnership. Always make sure you anchor your answer to the specific person or institution that the prompt is asking about.
Section 5. Revealing language logic traps.
Now, I'm going to let you in on a little insider secret so you can spot the specific linguistic traps that test designers love to build into these passages. Trap number 1 is the literal versus figurative trap. Imagine the audio says, and why Molly T chose a 4-petal design instead of a jasmine design, well, that is literally the million-dollar question. So what's the trap? Well, because you just heard about a $1.5 million fine earlier, you might wrongly assume this phrase refers to the actual financial penalty. But the reality? The million-dollar question is just a very common English idiom. It means the most important or the most difficult question to answer. Context is absolutely everything here.
Trap number 2 relies heavily on concession and contrast logic. The audio might say something like, LV may have won the court case, but Molly T has gained sympathy. Now, if you just hear LV won and your brain stops listening, you are going to fall right into the trap of thinking LV completely dominated the whole situation. But test makers love testing this may have A but B structure. The court message is always B. Yes, legally LV won, but the real point of that sentence is that in terms of public relations, Molly T was the true winner.
And that brings us to our final trap, false causality. Let's say the passage mentions that Molly T donated money to a jasmine-growing region at about the exact same time this court case came out. The trap option will sneakily suggest that the court mandated Molly T to donate that money. But the reality is that simultaneous events, or correlation, do not equal causation. That donation was a highly strategic PR move. It was definitely not a legal requirement. So, as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative thought. Just how much more confident are you going to feel on your next exam now that you know how to see right through these traps? When you practice breaking down everyday news stories like this, identifying the true main idea, separating out the different viewpoints, and spotting those sneaky logic traps, you aren't just memorizing vocabulary, you are completely transforming the way you process information. Master the narrative and you will absolutely beat the traps. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today and keep up the amazing work with your focused learning.